Wow. John kind of says it this way. If you say that you love God and you hate your neighbor, the love of God isn't in you. It is easier to play the game than to actually do what God's word says. So what are you talking about, Mike? What is it that you're trying to get at? Well, I want to talk about the most powerful thing that Jesus said, and think about it. Jesus said a lot of powerful things. And to talk about this, we need to turn to Matthew chapter 22, verse 36. And as you get to that, this is basically what Jesus said. And what was taking place was that Jesus was talking amongst a number of people, and a number of rabbis were debating and talking about it. And they posed Jesus with a question. And this is what it says. It said in Matthew chapter 22, verse 36, it says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your mind." And then he goes on and says in verse 38, "This is the first and the greatest commandment." And then he says this in verse 39, "And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." Now, for those of you who have been in a church your whole life, you have probably heard this story. It was probably a time when one of the rabbis had mentioned a question which was probably popular amongst all of the rabbis at that time. And the question isn't so much about the greatest. The question has to do with priorities. Is there a command that trumps another command? Is there one command that I should be obeying more than another one? And at that particular time in the Pharisaical laws and the structure that they had, there was probably over 640 laws. And so the debate could be going on and on and on. And so this is kind of important. This is something which I think is interesting. And here's the thing. Jesus doesn't just give one. Hey, what's the greatest command? Well, I'll give you two. Well, there's a reason that he gives two instead of one. And he uses it when he says this, the second is like it. It's not like this is one and this is number two. Basically what he is saying is, there's not a differentiation between the one and the other. The one is just as important as the other. I can't give you the one and not give you the other because the two are inextricably tied together. This is something which is extremely important for us to understand. And so he kind of says the same is like it. And this leads to some important things that Jesus says. Therefore, loving your neighbor is just as important as loving God. Wow. John kind of says it this way. If you say that you love God and you hate your neighbor, the love of God isn't in you. And this is kind of becomes interesting you have to, in some respects, to be shaped by the thing that John says is that you actually have to love people and love God in the same way. Let me just put it this way. You have been shaped by two different types of people. You have been shaped by the people who have loved you, and you have been shaped by the people who have hurt you, one or the other. Take a look. Just stop and think about your life for a little while. And you know what the funny thing is? That some of the people who have hurt you may have been people who have had all the correct theology that you can have. They were right in about everything. And here's the other thing. Some of the people who loved you may not have even gone to church at all, or may not have exhibited any kind of faith in God whatsoever. Well, it's kind of interesting when you stop and think about it. It's not the fact that being right is not important. It is. But if you're right and you don't love somebody, then Jesus says, then it doesn't really matter. Now, to be right is important, isn't it? To be right, and the fact is this, love is a scalpel. Sometimes love hurts, and sometimes love makes us accountable, and love rejoices in good. But practicology is more important than your theology. How you love people, it says, is more important than what you know. Really? Does the Bible actually say that? Well, Jesus is kind of talking about this. What you know means a whole lot, but if you aren't loving people, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. And basically what he says, the law and the prophets hang on these things. In other words, it becomes the filter of all the other things. You can obey the other things, the other ones, and if all of a sudden the first two aren't there, you are in essence disqualifying all of the other things which are there. Everything hangs on how you love God and how you love people. The same level that you love others is actually the same level that you will be loving God. It's the template in which you put everything upon. If that's not the template that you're on, basically what is taking place is the predominant thought that you need to have is that no matter what I believe, no matter what we practice, at the end of the day, I have to somehow be loving people, at least according to what this commandment is actually saying. It is the acid test of your faith. So ask yourself, how am I doing when it comes to that? How am I doing at loving other people? At the end of the day, what matters is not so much what you say. If you are saying something and not loving people, what doesn't matter is what you are passionate about or how many scriptures that you know. If you know the whole Bible by heart and you don't love people, then there's a problem. That's what God is saying. Not correctness about theological positions, but basically, do I love people? Is my theological position correct? And if that is the case, then I should be actually loving people with everything that I have. Is that the flavor of everything you do?